living in an idyllic suburban neighborhood. Everything about our surroundings screamed peace and safety: pristine lawns, quiet streets, and neighbors who exchanged friendly waves. It was the kind of place where nothing sinister could ever be imagined. But a memory from a few summers ago has since lingered, like an unwelcome shadow that refuses to fade. My best friend James and I, restless teenagers craving adventure, often sought ways to break free from the monotony of our lives. Our friendship had been built on years of shared routines, from walking to school together to dreaming up daring plans to shake up our otherwise predictable world. One place became our escape: an abandoned building at the top of a hill, shrouded in mystery. The neighborhood, with its sprawling houses and towering trees, offered little in the way of excitement, so we turned to this eerie spot to satisfy our curiosity. Looking back, our fascination was fueled by boredom and the thrill of danger, though it was a decision I would come to regret deeply. The abandoned building at the top of the hill was nothing extraordinary, just a crumbling structure next to a vast cemetery, its windows boarded up and roof sagging. Inside, the walls were covered in peeling wallpaper and graffiti, and the air was thick with the scent of mildew. Despite its eerie state, it drew every kid in town, including James and me, who used it as a hideout to escape the monotony of suburban life. We spent countless hours there, spraying graffiti, climbing the roof, and dreaming of something more exciting. One humid summer night, after a string of disappointments, James and I found ourselves heading to the building again, seeking a distraction. The walk up the hill felt heavier than usual, and when we reached the top, the sight of the building cast an eerie shadow in the moonlight. It seemed almost alive, its jagged windows and twisted vines giving it a menacing, predatory look. Though we had been there countless times before, this time, the building felt different, sending a chill down my spine. Yet, we pushed forward, brushing off the unease as we always did. James, never one to waste time, picked up a rock and hurled it at one of the upper windows with a force that made me flinch. The sound of shattering glass was loud and piercing, the echoes bouncing off the empty walls and fading into the stillness of the night. I couldn't help but laugh, the sudden rush of adrenaline momentarily shaking off my unease. Not wanting to be outdone, I grabbed a rock of my own, aiming for a second-floor window. My throw wasn't as precise as James's, but when the glass finally broke with a satisfying crash, I felt a surge of pride. "Bet you can't hit that one," James said, pointing to a tiny attic window at the top of the building. It was a challenge I couldn't refuse, though I quickly regretted it. No matter how hard I tried, each rock I threw either missed or clattered uselessly against the brick walls. After what felt like an eternity of failed attempts, I gave up with a frustrated groan and tossed the last rock to the ground. James, of course, was grinning, full of confidence. As we stood there in the eerie silence, the broken window, now nothing more than a jagged frame, seemed to stir. It wasn't much at first, just a flicker of motion that caught the corner of my eye. I turned toward it, thinking it might have been a bird or the moonlight playing tricks. Before I could even voice my curiosity, a small, dark object shot out of the shattered window and landed at our feet with a dull, unsettling thud. Startled, James and I froze. For a second, neither of us said anything. Then, slowly, our eyes dropped to the object lying on the ground. My breath caught in my throat as recognition set in. It was a rock, but not just any rock. It was the same one James had just thrown, unmistakable because of the unique marks scrawled on its surface. We both knew it instantly. My mind raced to find an explanation, but the logical part of my brain faltered, unable to process what I was seeing. "What the hell?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice trembling and barely audible over the thunderous pounding of my heart. My words hung in the air between us, heavy with unease. James turned to me, his confident smirk replaced by a look of genuine confusion. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, searching for some sort of rational answer, something that would explain what had just happened. The only thing we could come up with was that someone else had to be inside the building, playing some kind of prank on us. The idea, surprisingly, didn't scare us as much as it should have. In fact, James's expression shifted almost instantly, excitement flickering in his eyes. "Someone's messing with us," he said, his voice low but tinged with eager determination. "Let's catch them." The thought of turning the tables appealed to both of us. Fueled by a mix of adrenaline and teenage bravado, we decided to sneak inside and confront whoever was behind it. The front door to the building was ajar, just as it always was. It hung crookedly on rusted hinges, its paint long since chipped away to reveal splinters of bare, weathered wood. Pushing it open, we slipped inside, instantly greeted by the familiar stench of mildew and rot. The air was heavy, stale, and thick with a dampness that clung to our skin. My stomach turned slightly, but I forced myself to focus. The wooden floorboards groaned beneath our weight with every cautious step, the sound amplified by the building's emptiness. Shadows danced along the walls, their shapes twisted and distorted, making the graffiti-covered interior feel even more oppressive than usual. James, always the braver of the two, took the lead without hesitation. Each step he took on the creaky stairs seemed to reverberate through the building, the sound sharp and grating. I followed close behind, my nerves on edge, my eyes darting to the shadows as if expecting them to move. When we reached the top, we were met with a small, unassuming wooden door. Its surface was warped with age, the wood dark and pitted, as if it had absorbed decades of secrets. James glanced back at me, his expression a mix of curiosity and determination. I gave him a silent nod, urging him forward. With one smooth motion, James pushed the door open. The hinges groaned in protest, the sound echoing like a low moan. What hit me first wasn't what I saw, it was the smell. A wave of nauseating stench rolled out, so overpowering that I instinctively covered my nose and mouth. It was a foul, cloying mix of rot and death, a smell so visceral it made my stomach lurch. James stepped inside, one hand pressed to his face, but I hesitated, frozen in the doorway. My instincts screamed at me not to follow, every nerve in my body rejecting the idea of entering that room. But James, oblivious to my hesitation, moved further inside, his curiosity pulling him deeper into whatever horror lay within. The room was small and bare, except for a crude pentagram painted on the floor in stark white. Unlit candles were scattered around the room, and a closet door stood slightly ajar, emanating the foul odor. James moved closer to the closet, but I grabbed his arm, shaking my head. "Let's get out of here," I whispered. Before he could respond, I glanced back at the staircase and froze. Two cloaked figures were standing there, staring up at us. My stomach dropped, and I grabbed James's arm, pulling him toward the shattered attic window. "Go! Go!" I shouted. We scrambled onto the roof, the jagged edges of the broken glass catching on our clothes as we climbed out. The night air was cold and sharp, and the roof's steep pitch made every step feel treacherous. Behind us, the door burst open, and we heard heavy footsteps pounding toward us. "This way," James shouted, leading us toward a hatch that opened to a ladder. But when we reached it, we found it locked from the inside. Panic set in as the footsteps grew louder. Suddenly, a booming voice echoed from below. "They went that way." The deep, guttural tone sent a shiver down my spine. Desperate, I stomped on the hatch with all my strength. On the third attempt, it gave way with a loud crash, and I fell through, grabbing the ladder just in time to avoid a nasty fall. James followed close behind, and we sprinted down the staircase, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. We burst out the back door and ran straight into the cemetery, leaping over gravestones and ducking behind a large marble monument. For a moment, we thought we were safe. But then we saw them, 4 or 5 figures cloaked in darkness, moving deliberately around the building. Their outlines were barely visible in the moonlight, but their frantic search beneath bushes and behind trees revealed a more sinister purpose. James and I quickly retreated into the cemetery, using the shadows to mask our movements. Once we were certain we hadn't been spotted, we slipped over the back fence and sprinted home, not daring to look back. What we learned from today's story: abandoned buildings hold dark secrets, never ignore what's left behind.